Good morning, guys. Welcome to the podcast, wherever you are. I'm really happy to welcome from the London, Andrew Muir Wood, and he is a researcher and strategist at Muir Wood and Company, and he has a long history of working with startups. And if you're interested in ensuring product leadership and businesses have accurate and actionable customer insights to support data-driven decision making, Andrew's the guy. So I'm really happy to have him on to talk about this topic and add value to the audience. So, Andrew, welcome.
Yes, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I know it's evening there in UK. So, talk about your company and your business, and we'll dive into the questions and conversation.
Yeah, there's two things I'm involved with. So I in my day-to-day work, I run a research consultancy that does research and strategy for tech companies, big and small. About half the work is with big kind of global corporates, and about half the work is with startups and it's all kind of discovery work with customers. And then the other thing I'm involved with is called Elios, and it is a platform for researchers who are surviving in this crazy AI world that seems to be changing, every year. And so we're trying to make a space where we can talk about that and think about evolving and making sure we stay up to date.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I always love the academic and I always love the research world. So, kind of what first theme is talking about early stage customer research. And so for startups, what are common mistakes they make when conducting early stage customer research?
Yeah, so the two main mistakes are not doing enough research and doing too much research. So the first one is, it's very easy to think that, to assume that what customers, want, who they are, unless you're building for someone who's exactly the same as you. It's really important to get inside their shoes and make sure you understand their context and what they're willing to allocate money towards. And so it's quite easy to get carried away and say, well, we're building a product for restaurant owners and there's 1 million restaurants in the West. And so that's our addressable market. But actually we haven't gone in and worked out what kind of restaurant, what size, what kind of food, what kind of, operation they're running, and does it fit into that world? So that's the not doing any is the first mistake. The next mistake is just talking to hundreds of people, but with no structure and no kind of plan. And I think that can also be very confusing because I've had clients come to me and say, I've spoken to 120 customers, and that looks very impressive, and investors and other founders might be very jealous that they've spoken to 120. But then I asked them, what questions did you ask? Like, how did you evolve your hypothesis every 10 conversations? How did you choose who to speak to? And there was no systematic process. And so it wasn't really scientific. It was just whatever this person took from those conversations. And so, those will be in a notepad on the phone or on Google Docs or on a piece of paper somewhere. And it's just it's a collection of random pieces of information. And it's also whatever you choose to remember, filtered through all of your biases and all of your excitement about the product that you're building. And so I think in both of those situations, what you end up with is creating something that's convenient to you, a convenient version of reality, rather than something that's really grounded in evidence and something that should be repeatable by someone else who followed the same research. And that's a major test for whether they've done it right.
Yeah. The other question is because a lot of startups they struggle with product market fit, and how do you help businesses uncover true needs of their customers, especially when customers may not articulate them directly or it's a new industry, kind of it's the vision or it's not very clear. How do you help how do you use research to help that?
Yeah, it's a really good point that you made, that customers are not necessarily able to articulate, what they need, or absolutely can't explain what the solution should be. And so it's a mistake to expect them to be able to know these things. And so What they are experts in is their problems. And so if they are aware of a problem and they're aware of what impact that problem is having on them, and maybe they're even actively looking for a solution to that problem and allocating money towards that solution, then these are all really good signs, because it means that when you come along with something that fits into that, it's going to be very easy to sell, because that you're not going to be teaching them about the problem. You shouldn't be teaching them about that they have the problem. They should know they have the problem. Later on, there will always be customers who don't realize they have the problem, but those are people that are very difficult to sell to immediately, and it's much easier to sell to people who are aware. And so I think that making your life easy by going after people who are very aware of the problem and already showing evidence of allocating money to the problem gives you a stepping stone, gives you that first audience, and gives you credibility, gives you all of those network effects. I think whenever I hear a founder or a client saying we need to educate our clients, alarm bells ring for me, because
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if your product is futuristic. Someone still has to buy it, and for them to buy it, they have to understand how it's going to fit into their life and make their life better. And so they have to connect it with an existing problem.
Hmm. Um, and how does customer research differ between startups and established corporations?
Well, with startups, it's probably often the difference between surviving and not surviving. I think that uncovering that unmet need early on, and then validating that people are willing to spend money on it is completely critical. And in a way, a startup is just a learning. It is one big experiment. You're creating an experimental business model that you're trying to see if it's going to work, and that is the whole point. You're just trying to accelerate that learning as fast as you can. Whereas in a bigger corporation, you are probably working in a part of that organization, in a team, you're working on one feature, and so the success or failure of that feature is probably not going to bring the whole business down. It might, if it does work, and in situations like I've done some work with a client called Deliveroo, which is like Uber Eats in the UK, and we worked on making it possible to use new types of payment in certain countries. And by adding new types of payment to the platform, they were able to increase their revenue by a large amount. And so we made them loads of money. But if we hadn't done the research, would they have worked it out? Maybe they would have got there. The company probably would have continued, somewhere. And so I think it's important, but it kind of doesn't stand. It's less impactful when it's kind of absorbed into a bigger organization.
Yeah. The second theme is, we were talking about this early stage customer research. And then once, the startup is, so we're talking about bridging startups and established brands. And a lot of times, companies or corporations, like established ones, they have this, they suffer from they're just too big and too bulky, bureaucracy. And so they get eaten up by the faster, nimble startup, example, Google or, Netflix. But how can established corporations adopt the agility and innovative mindset of startups?
Yeah, and I think it's difficult, because you often have to build something that eats your own customer, and so it's very brave, and it's kind of scary, because when even Netflix, they moved from DVD. Remember, you used to be able to rent DVDs from Netflix, and then they started doing online streaming, and there probably was a period of time when the transition time, when that must have been really scary for them. And they probably had one team on DVDs and another team on streaming, and the DVD team was, our bonuses are attached to the success of this, and that's what it comes down to, really. It's in human incentives, and if a human is on a team that is essentially going to suffer because of another team inside the company, then they're probably not going to make life super easy. And so everyone needs to have this mentality that actually we need to see the bigger picture, and we need to be competing, and we need to be agile, and that sometimes means doing stuff that hurts another part of the business, and so but we should be experimenting, because if we don't do it, someone else will do it, and then that someone else may end up disrupting the market and ending up running away with it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember that day that they decided to switch to streaming, and their stock price tanked, and everybody was like, "Is this the end of Netflix?" But they're actually thinking more strategically, just long term. Um, so the other question is, so kind of examples. Have you seen examples where collaboration between startups and established companies led to exceptional results?
Um, I've worked in a startup that was selling to a large enterprise in the finance sector, and we after it took us a long time to make it happen. It took 18 months to get a pilot to happen, and then the pilot happened, and then there was some more negotiations, and eventually it led to a huge relationship and a huge change in the processes for this big financial institution, so that a task which used to take weeks then suddenly took 30 minutes for them. And so by being open to a startup, an innovative startup way of thinking, this massive corporation could save a huge amount of time, and therefore they could process more clients, and then they could process more complicated clients because they had more time. And so I think that when you bring in an external startup mindset, you can sometimes find these massive efficiencies because they've come at it from another angle, or maybe with a naivety that has allowed them to make a jump. And so it took a painfully long period of time, and it required a very senior person in the bank to kind of champion this process. But it had amazing results, and it completely transformed how that team operated. So that's the first-hand experience of it for me, and I think it's happening all the time when those barriers are removed. You get the best of both worlds. You get the scale and the massive customer base of an existing company, but you have the agility and sort of innovative mindset of the startup coming together and with magical results.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of Microsoft and OpenAI. And then, what are your thoughts, especially with artificial intelligence and how that's accelerating research and collaborations, and how does AI fit into this whole picture?
Yeah, so this is a very interesting area, especially if you are a researcher. We've had a rough couple of years because 2 or 3 years ago, everyone who was working in research in these big companies, including some of the ones we mentioned, got made redundant. And so it feels like for researchers, it's coming from all sides. From one side, there's other team members like designers and product managers who want to do their own research and don't feel like they need a researcher. And then from the other angle, you've got AI tools coming in and doing more and more of the research can be done by a chatbot or by I encountered a company that even does live interviews like this with an AI talking interviewer that can listen to the answers and then respond to the answers and make reference to the things that were said in that conversation. So it's getting better and better at the bottom, and so what you think of as a survey today could actually be a sort of an acceptable interviewer, tomorrow. But on a similar level to maybe someone who calls you up and just asks you 5 questions about your eating habits, and maybe asks a couple of follow-up questions. AI can definitely do that. What it's not doing so far is this kind of middle ground of and the upper, the sort of more sophisticated strategic discovery, where there's a lot more nuance, and there's a lot more where you have to build a rapport and you have to build a connection with the other person. And so I think there's for a period of time there'll be a need for humans to do that. But yeah, it is kind of scary. But on the flip side, there are tasks that in research that take so long that you would only do them on a big project. And now those tasks are available on a medium or small size project. So things like, minuscule linguistic analysis of a transcript is a really good application of large language models, because it's designed to analyze language. So then so I could do a research project where I interview 12 people, and I would normally just walk away with these are the big themes, strategically what's important. But actually I could then plug it into the AI and it could say, when people talked about this topic, they used this language and they used this, they paused here and they use this intonation. And so there's a second layer of analysis that can happen if you have the resource to do it. And so I think that's going to be really, really interesting. We're in this kind of Wild West phase right now, but I think as things level out, there will be some useful time savers and also some completely revolutionary sort of new types of insights that come out of our work.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be yeah, especially the transcripts have been really helpful in Chat GPT and the large language models. How can people find out more about you and learn more from you? I know that you're doing a lot of work and there's a lot of great things coming out of London, the city, in terms of fintech and just a lot of innovation. So, how can people find out more about you?
Yeah, so there's 2 or 3 places. If you are interested in this research community and being a part of that conversation about innovation in research, then Elios, YLEOS, is a great place to start. We're building that. But then if you're interested more in working with me as a consultant, or I talk a lot about research kind of process tools and ways of working. And I post a lot of those on LinkedIn and also on my own website, which is muirwood.co.uk. And so, yeah, if you track me down in either of those places, then I'm always trying to give back, and everything I'm learning about AI, I'm trying to share back as soon as I learn it. So there's loads of good stuff there. And from time to time, I lecture at universities and I do courses as well. So lots of ways to get in touch and to learn.
Yeah. Excellent. Thanks so much. And I know it's evening there. And so thanks so much for coming on and keep up the great work.
Thank you so much for having me on. And great. Best of luck with the podcast.
Thank you.